الرحمن الرحيم. الله لا إله إلا هو. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء. وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم. الله ولي الذين آمنوا يخرجهم من الظلمات إلى النور والذين كفروا أولياؤهم الطاغوت يخرجونهم من النور إلى الظلمات أولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. ألم تر إلى الذي حاج إبراهيم في ربه أن آتاه الله الملك إذ قال إبراهيم رب الذي يحيي ويميت قال أنا أحيي وأميت. قال إبراهيم فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأت بها من المغرب فبهت الذي كفر والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. أو كالذي مر على قرية وهي خاوية على عروشها قال أن فأماته الله 100 عام ثم بعثه قال كم لبثت؟ قال لبثت يوما أو بعد يوم. قال بل لبثت 100 عام فانظر إلى طعامك وشرابك لم يتسنه وانظر إلى حمارك ولنجعلك آية للناس وانظر إلى العظام كيف ننشزها ثم نكسوها لحما فلما تبين له قال أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير. وإذ قال إبراهيم رب أرني كيف تحيي الموتى قال أولم تؤمن قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن قلبي قال فخذ 4 من الطير فصرهن إليك ثم اجعل على كل جبل منهن جزءا ثم اجعل على كل جبل منهن جزءا ثم ادعوهن يأتينك سعيا واعلم أن الله عزيز حكيم. مثل الذين ينفقون بأموالهم في سبيل الله كمثل حبة أنبتت 7 سنابل في كل سنبلة 100 حبة والله يضاعف لمن يشاء والله واسع عليم. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you so much for that beautiful recitation. Inshallah, we're going to get started with our first session for today, being Service Belongs Only to Allah, and we'll be joined by Brother Agha Ali Murtaza. So we can welcome him with one loud salawat, please. Allah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. So inshallah we'll continue from where we left off last night. We had some good interesting discussions and there were some points made. But since I see some new faces, I'll just mention a couple of them that were mentioned yesterday and are relevant to our discussion today. So we introduced Tawheed last night as the most important guiding principle of our behaviors, not only as individuals, but also as a society. And we said we can visualize, we can view this Tawheed, this concept of Tawheed, as a treaty between the believers and their creator. And we said we can visualize this as a binding document which contains these individual articles, all of which need to be fulfilled for that tree of man to bear fruit. Right? First of these articles was discussed yesterday as being what? That worship only belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Sheikh Mahdi had this discussion in the third session where we said that the worship only belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our topic today is what we will be focusing on is the second article in this treaty. Right? Before I mention what this second article is, I would want to propose a question. Right? And the question will come to your mind as soon as you read the following verse. So if you're on the first slide, you should have the verse in front of you, and I have highlighted the key words there, which might bring a question in your mind. So this is the verse from Surah Tawbah, 9th chapter of the Quran, and the verse 31. It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا. Right? It's talking about the Jews and the Christians. And it said the Jews and the Christians, have taken their rabbis, their priests, their scholars, their scribes, and their monks as what? As Rabb, as their lords. Right? Min dunillah, right? Apart from God. So basically what they did, they took their priests and their monks, elevated their status, brought up to the level of Lord, and put them aside, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then ayah mentions that not only the monks and the priests, but they also took Masih ibn Maryam, Isa as their Lord. Right? وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا. But what were they commanded? They were commanded not to worship anyone, but one God. Right? Then the verse continues. It says, La ilaha illahu. Right? It says the phrase of Tawheed. There is no God. Not that there is other God, but we are choosing God, as was mentioned last night. But there is no God but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the verse continues and it says, Subhanahu amma yushrikun. Right? Glory be to Him above the partners they ascribe. Look at the word here. It says, amma yushrikun. Right? By doing this, what did they do? They did shirk. Right? The greatest of sins. Now, as you read this verse, you might say, okay, I know that the Christians have this belief of Trinity and they do consider Isa as one of the three gods. But what about the monks? What about the priests? I don't know. I haven't seen any Christian bowing down to a priest. I haven't seen a Jew bowing down in front of their scholars, for example. Right? So this is a question that should immediately come to mind as you read this verse. Now, so this question is not being raised for the first time. It was asked even to our Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, right? And he had a response for this. Not only the Prophet, we have explanations from our Imams as well. But before I go into those explanations, I want to make this question a bit more concrete, right? So if we can go to the second slide. So we have these stories about the prophets mentioned in the Quran and elsewhere as well, where these prophets, whenever they would use to propagate Islam, their deen, propagate the religion of Allah, they would make enemies. The tyrannical rulers of that time or the elites of that society would become enemies to them, right? But what were they calling towards, right? So the Quran narrates a sentence in Surah Araf, Surah Hud, and Surah Mu'minun, and this is the same sentence that Hazrat Nuh used, Hazrat Ibrahim used, Hazrat Saleh used, Hazrat Shoaib used, right? These four prophets use the same sentence. If you go in the Quran and you look at the ayat in Surah Araf, it says, وَقَالَ نُوح, this sentence, right? And we sent Hud and he said this sentence. What is this sentence? It says, فَقَالَ, he said, the prophet said, Ya qawmi, O my people, right? اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ, right? What is it saying? It says, pretty simple. O my people, worship Allah, right? You have no God except Him. Pretty straightforward, right? What was the problem here? Why were they making enemies? The people themselves had many gods. Some would believe in one God, some would believe in another God. For example, in the idol worship, they had these Lat. All of us have heard the name, right? They themselves had many gods. Some would believe in some God. Okay, you don't accept the message. Why would they become enemies? Similarly, there's this tradition narrated from the Holy Prophet, where when he started to propagate Islam, what did he say? He said, "Qulu la ilaha illallah tuflihu." What do you have to do? Just say these four words. La ilaha illallah. 4 words, right? Just have to say these 4 words. And as soon as you say these 4 words, tuflihu, you will do what? You will succeed. You will attain salvation, right? Now, question is, again, the same question. What was in these 4 words? What's the secret in here, right? Okay, you don't want to say it, don't say it. Why would they become the enemies of the Prophet? Right? What these people indulged in ignorance and sins knew that we are missing here. It's surely more than just bowing down, right? They knew that these 4 words have some implications. Okay, so now let's see what explanation we have and try to answer this question. Again, the question is that these Jews and Christians, they didn't worship their priests, they didn't worship their monks, they wouldn't bow down to them, they wouldn't do sajda in front of them, for example, they wouldn't worship them. What's happening here, right? So if we can go to the next slide, we have this tradition where there's a story about the person called Adi. And this Adi is Adi bin Hatim. And I'm assuming most of you must have heard the name Hatim. Hatim is this proverbially famous figure for generosity. Right? Whenever someone would want to give an example of generosity, they would mention Hatim. Right? Now, if he was really generous or not, that's a different story. But for now, this is the son of Hatim. And he was a Christian before. He's a leader of a tribe, and he, with his people, accept Islam. Right? Once he accepts Islam, his tribe also accepts Islam, and they come to Medina. He comes to Medina, and the Prophet sees him. And what Prophet notices is that there is a crucifix in his neck. Right? The thing with a cross, he has it in his neck. As soon as the Prophet sees this, he tells him, remove this. And he said, okay, Chash, I will remove it. When he removes it, the Prophet recites this verse for him, the verse we just talked about the Jews and Christians taking their priests as their lords. Prophet recites this verse. As soon as Adi listens to this, he has the same question which you guys have, right? He says, no, that's not true. I think I have the words up there. And he says, no, that's not true. When did we worship our priests? When did we worship our monks? Right? So this person, remember, is a Christian. So he knows the belief system there. He knows the acts of worship. Right? But he's still objecting to this. He says, no, there seems to be a mistake here. Why is he objecting? Because in his mind, worship means what? What it means to us today before this, right? We said, okay, if you want to visualize worship, what do? We said this person, if he's worshiping someone, he's raising his voice in prayer, for example, or he's bowing down in veneration, right? Either he's doing that, he's showing this humility physically or in his heart. That's how we visualize worship. So he had the same concept of worship in his mind. That's why he's saying, okay, no, that's not true, right? That doesn't make sense. So he's surprised after listening to this verse, and I mean, even today, right? When do we see a Jew or Christian doing this? So he says, no, Prophet, that's not true. When did we worship, right? So see how the Prophet replies. He says, قَالَ أَلَيْسَ يُحَرِّمُونَ مَا أَهَلَّ اللَّهُ فَتُحَرِّمُونَ, right? Yes, you do not bow down to your rabbi and your priests, but what do? You accept whatever they tell you. They tell you, God has permitted this, we don't allow it. Okay, we forbid it. He said, okay, sure, we'll also make it haram. And what they do, they say, وَيُحِلُّونَ مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ, and you do accept it. They say, okay, this thing God has made haram, we'll make it halal, right? And what do you guys do? You accept it, okay, as you say. And he actually poses this question to Adi. He said, do you do this? And Adi says, yes. Qala, qultu, bala. Yeah, we do this. And then see the reply. I have highlighted the words as well. Qala, fatilqu ibadatuhum. This is nothing but worshipping them. Right? He's not saying it is as if you are worshipping them. It says it's nothing. It is but worship. Right? So what is here? It says you accept whatever they tell you. This unquestioned obedience is worship. This is the second article in that treaty that we're talking about. Right? This unquestioned worship, this unquestioned obedience. I have this another hadith up there by our sixth Imam, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And he says, Ama wallah, by God, ma samu lahum, they don't fast. He's giving this explanation again in line with that verse. He's explaining that verse. He's saying these Jews and Christians, they don't fast for their priests, fast for their monks. Wala sallu lahum, they don't pray the prayer for them. They don't offer the prayers for them. But what do they do? Again, the same thing. Ahallu lahum haraman wa harramu alayhim halala. Right? And what these priests do, they change what God has made permitted to forbidden, and the other way around, right? And what do these followers do? فَاتَّبَعُوهُم, right? They do the ittiba, they accept it. Then look at the words afterwards. As soon as they accept, Imam says what? As you accept it, right? What is the next word? It says فَأَرْبَدُوهُم. Again, the word arbada, right? أَرْبَدُوهُم مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. They are worshipping, they are doing the ibadah in the second meaning that we talked about of these priests, of these monks, مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, even without realizing it. So they are indulging in that greatest of sins, shirk, without even realizing it. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide now. So let's stop here and reflect a bit, right? Remember, this verse is not a tradition; it's included in the book of guidance, right? It's there for a reason, right? Why is God mentioning this behavior of the Jews and Christians to us? Why is it relevant to us? Right? Well, the answer is obvious, right? It's a warning. The very people, the Jews and Christians, who thought they accepted none but Allah, ended up doing shirk without even realizing. And so it's being told, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O people who believe, be careful. Right? Be careful that this weed of shirk doesn't hinder your growth towards perfection. Right? What does this mean? This means don't accept an authority that's not authorized. That's an authority that doesn't conform to God's will. Now, this authority can be internal or external. We had some examples of external authorities last night. We discussed about tyrant rulers, and we had this external authority, religious authority in terms of monks and priests in the verse. Now I want to point towards some internal as well. Right? So first thing I have up there is these self-desires. Again, this is a very famous words here, which says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أفرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه. Right? Have you seen the person who has done what? Who has taken his self-desires as his Lord. Now again, this cannot be in the meaning of bowing down. This cannot be in the meaning of raising voice in prayer. Right? This ibadah here is again in the second meaning. Accepting what my desires tell me, what my nafs tell me, without considering anything else, is problematic. It's as if you're worshipping your own self, your nafs al-ammara. Right? Now, at the primary level, yes, what you have to take care of is as if these desires are in line with the commandments of the Sharia. That's the primary level. But at the secondary level, what I want to point out here is even if all of these desires are halal, right? If all of these desires are allowed, even there you have to be careful. Don't accept whatever your nafs says so that it becomes your master and you its slave. Right? You have to be the manager there as well. You have to manage the affairs of your nafs as well. Give it some of the desires so that it doesn't rebel, but don't give it everything. I mean, there's a lot to say here, but inshallah, we'll move on. So that this second treaty, second article in this treaty becomes what? Becomes that this unquestioned obedience or this submission is for no one but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now I have put a point here, and it says absolute submission to Allah. It says no qiyas. What I wanted to point out here that there's this illness prevailing in society. When the people do want to worship, but what they say is, okay, I want to worship, but this specific rule in Islam, I cannot understand it, I cannot comprehend it. It just goes against my understanding of equality. It goes against my understanding of justice, for example. Let me give you an example. So, in the rules of inheritance, we have this difference in how the inheritance is divided between men and women. Right? There's a reason for that, and the son is given double the share of the daughter. Right? You have this ruling in Islam. Now, someone would come up here and say, "No, this doesn't go well with justice. This is oppression. This is inequality." Right? Says, "No, I don't think this is true. I won't accept it." Another example. person comes up and says, Islam cannot be that mean, right? It cannot be that biased, discriminate, asking the woman to cover their whole body and men can just roam around in t-shirts, right? So there's a purpose behind it, there's a reason. Of course, we're not going into that. What I'm trying to show here is what we do. We try to make these reasonings, make these deductive analogies. Why? Because we want to worship, but in a way that I want. You know who did this first time? Iblis, right? What did he say? He said, "Oh God, just bar me from doing this one prostration in front of Adam, right? Let me not do this, just this one, right? And in return, what will I do? I will worship you, and a'buduka ibadatan lam ya'buduha malakum mukarrab wala nabiyyun mursal." I would do such a worship that not an angel would have done it before, nor a prophet would have done it before. It was such an ibadah. What was the response? فَقَالَ اللَّهُ لَا حَاجَةَ لِي إِلَىٰ عِبَادَتَكَ. I don't need your worship. And he continues, إِنَّمَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ أَعْبُدَ مِنْ حَيْثُ أُرِيدُ. I want you to worship me the way I want. Right? لَا مِنْ حَيْثُ تُرِيدُ. Not the way you want to worship. Right? So just one point I wanted to make here, that is when we say absolute submission, yes, we have to use our mind, we have to use our intellect, but when our intellect says that this is beyond your scope of intellection, you have to fully submit here. That's it. You submit to whatever the commandment is. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. Now we want to discuss how wide the horizon is. This obedience thing, how far does it go? And we have this hadith from Imam, ninth Imam Muhammad Jawad alayhi salatu wasalam. He says, "Man athqa ila natiqin faqad abada." Right? Whoever pays attention to a speaker has done what? Has worshipped him. Again, the word arbada, done the ibadah. Right? Well, you all shouldn't be here then, right? Unless you're not paying attention. But since you're paying attention, you will notice the hadith doesn't end there. Right? And the Imam continues, says, فَإِنْ كَانَ النَّاطِقُ يُؤَدِّي عَنِ اللَّهِ. If the speaker is speaking from Allah, speaking the words of Allah, speaking the teachings or the commandments of Allah, فَقَدْ عَبَدَ اللَّهِ. So if you're paying attention to such a speaker, you have done what? You have worshipped not the speaker but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِنْ كَانَ النَّاطِقُ يُعَدِّي عَنِ الشَّيْطَانِ. If the speaker is speaking the words of shaitan, right? He's guiding you astray, right? فَقَدْ عَبَدَ الشَّيْطَانِ. See how far this goes, right? You have worshipped the shaitan now. That's why we have to be very careful on who we are listening to, right? We need to be sure that the words that are being used are godly words. The concept that's behind those words are true concepts. The application of those concepts that the speaker is making is doing it the right way. And the intention behind using those words are all the right intentions. So if you can go on to the next slide now. So looking at Tawheed with this lens, it becomes more than just an abstract belief, right? It becomes a principle that is supposed to be applied in our daily lives, right? And the way we introduced Tawheed, how different is this Tawheed from the Tawheed of saying God is one but not two? Right? How different it is. And we understood all of it from none other than the book that is normally thought to be irrelevant to our lives. We used Quranic verses, right? The book that's there on the topmost shelf of our library, inaccessible to those who it came to guide, right? It came to illuminate the hearts, and we limited it to what? To marriages and funerals. Inshallah, this is not the case with us, inshallah. Brothers and sisters, this book introduced itself. It says, I am a book of guidance. Right? Hudan lil muttaqeen. I am a book of guidance. Guidance for where? For this world. I'm here to solve the issues of this very world. Right? Familiarize with its content, you will find it to be a bottomless treasure and a limitless ocean. And if you noticed, we had all the scholars that we had yesterday and even today, inshallah. There was this unique approach where all of us used, right? We tried to make our points using Quranic verses, right? And we emphasized Quranic understanding. Why? Why am I giving you this reminder right now? Because we have these limitless snares that are set to keep us away from the Quran. In the interest of time, I won't go into all of these. I had 3-4 objections listed, but I will just talk about one of them. A person might come and say, I cannot benefit from the Quran. I don't understand it. Only the infallibles understand it. Right? You know what that means? What it is equal to? It's like saying that if prayers are what my master Ali offered, there is no need for me to pray. That's ridiculous, right? And it goes against what Imam Ali is mentioning in this hadith. It says, Ma jalasa ahadun. It says, no one. It doesn't say a Muslim. It doesn't say an Arab. It says, no one sits with this Quran. Sits meaning connecting with it, reading it, understanding it. Save that when he gets up, he has either more or less. He either has more guidance or less blindness. Right? Again, it's no one. Right? Now, moving on, we have this another hadith from the Prophet. And if you read this hadith, you'll see that it's directly addressing me and you. You know, he says, when the tribulations cover you like the blackness of a dark night, then hold on to the what? The Quran. Right? It will guide you. It will save you. Right? Is now not the time? Do we not see tribulations covering us like the darkest of nights? Is it not to me and you that the Prophet is talking to? In this hadith, after mentioning this thing, the Prophet lists a number of benefits that the Quran has, and one can reach those benefits. But again, the first step in reaching those benefits is nothing but understanding the Quran, understanding the book of guidance. So now that we have established Quran as a guide, if you can go to the next slide, I have this passage from the Holy Quran. It's from Surah An'am, Surah chapter 6, from Ayah 114 onwards. if you guys have some electronic device or something on, you just open this passage of the Quran and go and have the translation in front of you. The first ayah says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أفغير الله أبتغي حكما وهو الذي أنزل إليكم الكتاب مفصلا. Right? Shall I seek a judge? This word hakam can be used as judge and ruler as well. Should I seek a judge or a ruler other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while it is He who has sent down to you the book well elaborated. Right? He has sent down guidance for me. Those, and then it continues, وَالَّذِينَ آتَيْنَاهُمُ الْكِتَابَ يَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّهُ مُنَزَّلٌ مِّن رَبِّكَ بِالْحَقِّ. Those whom we have given the book, the Ahlul Kitab, they know it has been sent from your Lord with the truth. So do not be فَلَا تَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْمُمْتَرِينَ. Do not be one of the skeptics. Right? So this ayah is talking about God being the only one worthy of judgment and authority. Next ayah. وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا. Right? So the word of your Lord has been fulfilled in truth and justice. لا مبدل لكلماته وهو السميع العليم. Nothing can change His words, and He's all-hearing, the all-knowing. Now here, fulfilled means it's finished, it's done, right? It cannot be undone, it cannot be changed. Whatever the enemies do, they won't be able to change the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His commandments are eternal, right? God's command was that a series of prophets should come and gradually lead mankind towards their destination. Then the last prophet came and he brought the man into a limitless field. He gave him the tools and said, take these tools and start your journey to infinity. Right? These tools will help man reach his perfection in that day and age, and in today's day and age, and in the future as well. Let's move forward. Next ayah says, وَإِن تُطِعْ. Make sure you zoom in a bit. وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Here comes obedience. Ita', right? Says, if you obey majority of the people on earth, يُضِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. They will lead you astray from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's very common today, right? We say, it's the majority is doing it. It cannot be wrong. Right? What is the Quran saying? Don't accept the opinion of the majority. Don't obey the majority without even thinking about it. And what do these people do? إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَخْرُصُونَ. They follow only conjecture. They don't have any knowledge. And they themselves do nothing but guesswork. They just make guesses. These people who set these trends and take up a mode of living and persuade other people to join them in this as well, are they themselves sure that that's the right way of living? A decade later, it will be disproved. Something else would come up and be the ideal. Right? Be careful. Our ideals should be taken from the Sharia, from Islam. Next ayah. إِنَّ رَبَّكَ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ مَنْ يُضِلُّ عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِالْمُهْتَدِينَ. This ayah says He knows the guided and the astray. Your Lord knows who's guided and who's off the path. Right? Now, The next ayah is the fruit of our discussion today. Pay close attention. It says, فَكُلُوا مِمَّا ذُكِرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ إِن كُنتُمْ. Sorry, you can't see the words here. إِن كُنتُمْ بِآيَاتِهِ مُؤْمِنِينَ. Eat from that over which Allah's name has been mentioned if you are believers in His ayat, in His signs. Now, this is a surprising transition here, right? We're talking about general principles, right? We're talking about God's exclusive authority. We're talking about His eternal commandments. We're talking about not following conjecture, not following guesswork. Right? How come suddenly now the Quran tells its listener, only eat from that which God's name has been mentioned? What's the connection? You're talking about general principles, you're talking about Tawheed, you're talking about obedience. And from there onward, you go into a specific ruling in ritual sacrifice that not sacrifice, but even when you are slaughtering an animal, there needs to be a mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's the connection? It's a striking transition, isn't it? This is where we are invited to contemplate, right? Let's try to find some connection here. What does it mean to invoke God's name when slaughtering an animal? If you look at other people having beliefs, even the idol worshippers, if they're doing something significant, they would invoke the name of their deity, right? A Christian might say, for example, in Christ's name, right? But if there's an action that does not begin in the name of God, is naturally done for someone or something other than God, right? For example, when you do something for money, or for your own desire, or for any such motivation, you do it in the name of that thing, meaning with that thing in mind, right? So, and if you're doing this, whatever you're doing, it is automatically directed towards whatever you invoke when you do it. Whether this invoking is out loud or it's in your heart. For example, you do something with money in mind, you direct that action towards money from start to finish. You say, okay, this action, this details of this action, each single part of that action should do what? Should result in me getting some money, for example, right? Similarly, when you undertake something in the name of God, with God in mind, then this act is directed towards God. He will now dictate how this act should be done. It should be done according to His commandments. Right? Coming back to the ayah, Quran says, you want to slaughter an animal for food? Do it in the name of Allah. Right? Think about this. Your urgent necessity, the very basic of needs, has to be obtained in the name of God. Meaning it should be for God. In other words, when you're filling your stomach, you should do this for God. Right? Why? Because filling the stomach isn't the principle upon which you should act. That principle is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if there came a time where you felt filling the stomach would take you away from God, you would forego this. Right? You would remain hungry. You would even die of hunger than turning away from God. Right? Why? Because you know that while food is necessary, it's not the principle I live my life for. That principle is none other than God. If he wants me to eat, I will eat. If He wants me to be killed thirsty in the plains of Karbala, I will do that. Right? He's the master, I am the abd. I am the servant. Right? So I'll just end with this. Maybe now it's more clear the wisdom behind the recommendation of saying Bismillah before anything you do. Right? And you know why this ayah mentioned slaughtering of men? Why it starts from food? Because any strength the human body gains for the sake of God will also be used for the sake of God. It's a logical conclusion. So inshallah, that's what I had. And if you can go to the last slide, we have this. I just wrote down all the points we discussed today. We started with the second article of the treaty. We said this is unquestioned obedience. We talked about the scope, and we talked about Quran as a guide, and then we talked about Tawheed in practice. Doing everything, anything we do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, may God give us a tawfiq of living a Tawheedi life. Whatever we do, having Him in His mind. And may He, inshallah, hasten the reappearance of our Imam. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.